So, that's a good habit, especially when you're low on time. Try to give yourself like a couple of moves, 2, 3, 4 options that you can have. So one, two, three. Yeah, okay, maybe. Yeah, I think I am going to do this one. But because I kind of had those in the back of my mind, it was very quick for me to make a decision. And I chose this one because after the king moves up, there's the skewer. So that was easy for me to find, like I said, primarily because I was already sort of thinking about that. We'll play e6. And, normally I say don't block in your bishops. I have a plan here. I'm going to go ahead and fee and kettle the bishop this way just to get a different type of position. So I am planning ahead for where my bishop is going to go. I'm not just kind of blindly moving this pawn forward and trapping my bishop. That's not a good habit to get into. But if you have a plan of how are you going to activate that bishop, that's different. So my plan is going to be to do this. Yeah, so I guess I am going to use this opportunity to bring my bishop here. I don't actually know what the best move is in this position. I'm kind of not really seeing like a clear plan. And this happens sometimes in chess. Like you get these moments in the game where you're like, I just don't know what the plan is. And so number one takeaway is don't do something stupid. Like, so you don't have a clear plan, fine, but don't do something ridiculous like, G5. And all of a sudden your king gets, in trouble or something, right? Try to play safe moves. Try to play moves that don't create massive weaknesses in your position, right? I think I'm just going to go back. I could defend, which actually maybe isn't as crazy as it looks. Because what I'm thinking is then I can follow it up with like this. And if I get that pawn defending that knight, it's much more of a powerful outpost. Actually looks pretty good too. Yeah, maybe I will do that. So I didn't see that move at first, but upon second glance, I'm going to go here. And I have a couple of points. Number one, like I just mentioned, pushing this pawn up here to defend. That's going to be a very powerful knight if I can get a pawn defending it like that. The other point is I have knight e4 immediately being threatened here on the queen, which looks also pretty good, getting both knights in outposts like that. Yeah, so c5, c4. It's got to be a good plan, right? And again, this knight, it's defended already with the queen. But if the rook comes over, I have to move it, and it's, not super solid. But once this pawn gets there, that knight's going to be very, very annoying. That was a good, I would say, example of how sometimes you get these situations where it's like, okay, opponent's position looks pretty solid. I don't exactly know what to do, right? That's where I was feeling right around here. Okay, I had developed my pieces. I had put my rooks to good squares, and then it was a question of like, I don't really see what to attack. I mean, white has a solid position here. And so, just be patient is kind of the takeaway. Don't, like I said, do something crazy and make a mistake, right? Like right here, I could have easily, let's turn on the analysis, could have easily played this move and gotten into big trouble. And yeah, Stockfish is saying rook f to b1 is the best move here. Knight to c4, this is what I was talking about. Takes, and bam, I did not like the look of this at all. Now, Stockfish says it's actually fine for me. I could play c5 and the game goes on and I'm okay. It's equal position, but I didn't like that. Here was a good idea to keep in the back of your mind too, of like you're doing one thing, you're kind of like fighting for these central squares, and then notice how I shifted and I was like, all right, now let's come over here and attack the king. And this can be very good from a practical standpoint. It's not always the best idea as far as what Stockfish wants you to do, but from a practical standpoint, it can be very difficult for your opponent to handle this kind of stuff because they're thinking about the knights, they're thinking about what's going on in the center, and then all of a sudden you start attacking them on the flank, and we started to see the mistakes, right? We started to, yeah, white was actually doing fine right here. They would have played queen a4, kind of like I mentioned. Now I all of a sudden have to be careful because my back rank is kind of weak. I'm going to go ahead and put my bishop here. It's defended by the pawn. It shuts down this file, and I'm allowing white to trade into me rather than the other way because now I'm the one who ends up with the open file. So I think white would have been better off to just leave that there, leave the tension, rather than give me control of the file. Because notice now the rook can't go there anymore. So Yeah, and of course, if you go here, it doesn't really do anything. My bishop is just going to sit there. You can't really make it move. And probably what I'm thinking of next is coming down here and start hunting some of these pawns. Okay, they do take. I'm going to take with the pawn and leave the queens on the board for now. I think this would also be fine. There's nothing wrong with my position going into an endgame, but in an effort to take advantage of these weaknesses, probably going to be easier to do that with a queen on the board. It's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, I don't see an immediate way to do that, but I'm anticipating that after I get this bishop out, that could change. So, again, let's check the game review. But again, we're seeing the same kind of thing. The opponents are playing pretty well, and then at one moment, they kind of just make that critical mistake, right? So, opponent wasn't doing anything really bad here. I mean, maybe this wasn't the best plan, putting the pawn here, but their position was still pretty solid. And then all of a sudden, bam, lost the queen, right? So same kind of thing. Let's play one more game. But those mistakes are critical. And if you want to get past 12, 1300, you have to avoid those. Yeah, we'll play knight c3. I don't see a good enough follow-up right now. And that's what you'll find a lot of times if your opponent's just going to play like super solid moves, like just developing their pieces, not really being aggressive. A lot of times there's not anything immediate that you can do. You kind of just have to be content with the small advantage and go into the middle game that way. That's an option, but I think bishop g5 just makes sense right now. I want to finish my development, and that just seems like the logical way to do it. So, okay, knight to e8, interesting move. So they're really trying to force the issue here, which, okay, I think I'm fine just trading that. I could also play a move like queen to d2 to defend, or just retreat, basically saying I'm happy that I made you move your knight back, which is not a terrible idea. Maybe I will do that, because a lot of times when your opponent's really cramped and they can't move, trading pieces just kind of helps them out a little bit. And so I am just going to go back and ask Black the question of how are you going to like develop your pieces when you can hardly move, right? You just moved your knight backwards. If Black wants to go back there, they can, but then I essentially got bishop e3 for free. Now we can play e5. You got the knight and the rook. If bishop takes here, I would take here. Black would have to save their bishop, and then I would be able to take here. That looks pretty good. But I think e5 would force bishop e7. And then probably f6 or something along those lines. Just to open everything up and go for the king. It seems like the best plan. Also, with my time in mind, I want to leave myself some time to figure out what's going to happen, so I'm not going to spend any more time. I saw enough to know that, hey, after the bishop goes back, I'm going to play f6. It's going to get wild and crazy, and I'm going to attack the king. That's all I needed to know, and I'm going to save the rest of my time for once that happens. And, ooh, I wonder if we're going to see bishop c4. Okay, so somebody had asked in the comments for me to try the Blackburn Shilling Gambit. So let's give it a shot. Knight to d4. And white's best move is to probably just take or to castle. c3, interesting move. Well, they didn't fall for the trap. The trap is if they take here, you play queen g5, and black is basically already winning. c3 is probably a good move. Yeah, because I guess I just have to take, and the queen's going to come out. And so, okay, we tried it. And here's a good example of sometimes you play these types of gambits. If they don't work out, you're just going to be in a slightly worse position. But it's not like, the game is over. We can still play on. And, okay, we can attack here, but what does that really accomplish? I don't know. I think maybe I'll just play queen e7. Gives me the option to do this. Or queen e1 if I want to come this way. And we'll go queen e7. A lot of times, moving the queen off the back rank is a good idea to get your last rook into the game because the queen sort of blocks the rook. But now that it's out of the way, I can slide it over here if I want to. Okay, I'm starting to look for tactics along this diagonal. Check. Bishop can't go there yet. What happens if I push? I don't have it defended well enough. Can I sacrifice a pawn? Ah, this move that I had earlier actually now is a skewer. So I think we will just do that. It just seems like a very basic and easy way to win a rook, actually. Good example of how something that I saw earlier doesn't really work, but one simple move by my opponent suddenly changes that, and now it's a powerful move. See, all of these are book moves. This is what I was talking about. I wasn't really thinking because I knew that these were book moves. And then right there, yeah, that was when our opponent kind of didn't know the line any further. So, you know, when you're first starting out, you don't want to just memorize openings. But there comes a point when you've kind of got the basic tactics under control, you're not blundering every move, when learning some openings can actually be very, very beneficial. And we saw that in this game. I knew the line, my opponent didn't, and they ended up getting into a bad position because of that, right? Had they known that this is the best move, and had they known to do this, I was going to go here. They could take here. I was going to go here. The game's going to go on, but they have a perfectly playable position. Capture on d4. Right, so they do go there. Let's just take a note of what is happening. That's defended. This is attacked. I'm leaning towards the move e5 because it really locks in that knight. Also lets my bishop out, which actually creates a very tricky threat here. There's an advanced tactic that I've seen before, and the way it works is you bring the bishop out, pinning the queen, and when you have the knight in the center, it actually tactically defends your bishop, because if white captures this, you jump in with the triple fork. So that's a very tricky move to see. So I believe e5 is a very good move. I could also play e6, but I don't like that my knight is not as well defended. I will play e5. Very dangerous threat, like I mentioned, and it's hard to see. Because at a quick glance, it looks like I can't go there, right? It looks like the queen just covers it. But if you look further, you will see the follow-up fork. We'll see if our opponent's going to notice that. If they play like a, random developing move, we're going to win the queen. I say that actually bishop d3 does defend. So bishop d3 would be a good move for white. Like bishop e2 or bishop c4, even bishop e3. A lot of moves white could play here that would lose the queen. And there we go. They didn't spot the tactic, so it looks like now's the time. Just double checking. Make sure there are no crazy tricks that white has that would get them out of that, but it's a pretty straightforward pin followed by the fork. And so bishop to b4, probably going to get the brilliant move on that one. But definitely remember this tactical idea. It's a pretty cool one when you can pull it off like this. Okay, so here we go. I could simply trade. I could also take this opportunity to pin the rook and potentially threaten to attack it with the pawn. Looks very dangerous. I think I will do that. Pinning pieces like this is very dangerous, especially when you have a follow-up pawn that can attack it. Yep, and white doesn't prevent that. Even though they defend, this is not a threat because the rook can't move. So I'm going to simply play e4 and capture it next move with my pawn. You can see how dangerous it can be to have your pieces pinned like that. Like if I was super low on time, I'm not super low. I have 2 minutes, which is plenty of time. But if I was like 20 seconds or something and I was afraid I was going to lose on time, I would probably just sacrifice everything here to go into an endgame where I have an extra rook, bring my rook around, start hunting the pawns, and that would be an easy way to win. And I wouldn't really have to think about anything. So notice when I play e6, I'm immediately shutting down this bishop on the diagonal. One drawback of this move is that I'm blocking my bishop in. And that's something that I kind of was planning ahead for, and I had this idea in my mind that I was going to play a6 and b5 and put my bishop over here. So you can sometimes do this. You just have to understand what you're doing and have kind of a plan for that bishop if you are going to block it in, like what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and play bishop e7 because I want to castle. Now, a lot of times when a4 happens after the pawn's already on b5, the best thing to do is just push by. And if you think about it, if I leave it sit there, you know, white's just going to capture, I'm going to lose a pawn. If I take, white's going to capture somehow, and then this is actually a target for me. See, the bishop and the queen and the rook are all going to be lined up there. I'm going to have two isolated pawns. And so usually just pushing by makes the most sense in this type of setup. And you can see we kind of gained some space, and it doesn't let, you know, white's rook into the game, and we continue with the game. I might even actually, oh, they do take it. So that's just a big blunder. Just loses a piece. I'm going to take here, and white's, yeah, basically the game is over. So, you know, at the 1300 level, we still see these big mistakes, right? It's not like that different from 1200. Our opponent was playing pretty well, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened here. They fell apart. Looks like, hope we just take the queen. Basically, what you're going to see from like 13 to 1800 is that everybody makes mistakes, but the 1800 makes less than the 1300. And as you go up, you see less and less and less mistakes. And that's kind of what chess is, right? When you first start playing, like every move you play is a blunder. And then you learn to like, okay, don't get checkmated in one move. Don't lose my queen. Don't, you know, hang free pieces all over the place. And then it's kind of this gradual climb of making less and less and less and less mistakes. And you don't have to necessarily come up with these super crazy complicated plans. Like I didn't do anything fancy in this game, right? I just didn't make any mistakes. And there was a very basic tactic, which we saw at the end, which cost white the game. It was literally that simple, right? Like you just can't take this pawn. You have to think through what's going to happen if black takes it back with the knight, right? Used to be my main system for a while. Bishop c5. I don't know why people play this because I don't think it's a very good move. Because if you think about it, you've got three pieces, and I have three pieces, which means I can play d4 here, and I do it with tempo. And so I'm not really sure. I just don't think it's a good move because I get this nice pawn center for free with the tempo on the bishop. So, yeah, here we go. Let's just develop our pieces. This is where I wanted to put my knight anyway. So if I can stop the check and develop, it makes sense. And we have this very nice pawn center here. I know some people might be afraid to play chess this way because you're like, oh, I'm losing all my pawns. But you have to think of it in terms of what are you getting in return? Well, look at this. 1, 2, 3 pieces. My king is totally safe. And look at black. They're not developing. They're not castling because they're grabbing pawns. Okay, they didn't want to grab this one, I guess. But, you know, it's not like I'm just losing pawns and I'm just losing. No, I'm getting different stuff in return, basically. Okay, and here we see the first big mistake that I was kind of talking about. Our opponent forgot about this. They just forgot about it. If you guys want to pause, well, not pause. If you want to see if you can find the best move, it's bishop b5 check, and it's going to win the queen. So there we see, you know, the big mistake. And I'm actually going to trade first before I take the queen, so I don't lose the bishop at the end. So, I mean, it's kind of the same story, right? Like, our opponents are playing okay, and then there's a big mistake. Yeah, so some of these moves are very difficult to tell why Stockfish is choosing one over the other. D6 actually does kind of make sense because we were going to lose that pawn anyway, potentially. And this way, this guy's stuck. Totally stuck. This bishop's not coming out now. So, yeah, that was a nice move that I could have found that I didn't see. So I'll keep that one in the back of my mind for next time. But I'll try to play things that I actually, know a little bit about what's going on. So this one I've talked about before. But what we're doing is relocating the knight over here to g6. And point number one is that we defend our pawn this way, so that if white ever trades the bishop for the knight, we've got this covered. The other point is sometimes you actually can use this knight to attack the king. So like knight to f4 is an idea, knight to h4, sometimes if this moves away or whatever, these are the kind of things you want to keep in mind. And so we'll see if we see that in this game. And since I'm not sure, I'm going to play d6. A lot of times when you're unsure, just play the most natural looking one, which is d6 in this case. If you don't see like a clear winner, which I didn't, all three of those moves seemed good to me. A lot of times I'll just default to like, what's the most natural looking move? Like if I was going to explain it to a beginner, what would I say? I would say play d6 and get your bishop out. So that's what I played here because I wasn't sure. But I think I'm going to focus on this instead because these pawns are just so amazing here. That's really where I want to play at. And it's a question of, do I want to, play d6 right now? Really the question. Am I worried about d6 is the other thing. It's just such an annoying problem for black to have if you can't bring out your bishop this way. That's why I really would like to play the move d6. I'm going to do it. It's just such a natural thing for black to push this pawn up and get your bishop out. And to not be able to do that causes so many problems. I'm going to value it higher than even castling in this moment. Now, could I be wrong? I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. You can see what I'm talking about, right? Like this is stopping this is stopping that. And so black's going to have to do something like this, but all the pieces are kind of awkward over here. And now I think it's finally time. I do have to pay attention to this. It's coming probably next move. Let's go ahead and castle. And I basically missed my opportunity against a stronger player to play this. And also I have that queen kind of shutting down where the knight can go. Black's going to have to go back, and then bam, d6. And same idea like I talked about. This guy's stuck, which means this guy's stuck. Everybody's stuck, right? See how powerful that is. So yeah, definitely did miss that one. I saw it a move later. Okay, and there we go. All right, so we did do it. Just and this is the kind of thing, right? Like against this 1300 rated player, I had a second opportunity to find that idea. But as you get higher and higher and play stronger and stronger players, you're not going to get second opportunities. You're only going to get one chance at those things, right? And that's where like you would need to be paying attention, and you would need to see this idea the first time, right? So King's Gambit. So in my opinion, the King's Gambit, always just play d5. Just always play d5. This is like the best way to respond to the King's Gambit. And it's called the Falkbeer counter gambit. But what you're doing is basically saying, look, you're opening up your king over here. You're going to try to attack me on the king side. I'm just going to bust open the center right away, get both of my bishops out. And it's just a very, tough move to deal with as a white. And I know this because I used to play the King's Gambit. And the only move that I hated to see was d5. Whenever I played the King's Gambit, I'm like, oh, no, not another, d5. So, I mean, simple thing here is we can go ahead and trade the queens. And white loses castling rights, which I'm happy with. And then we can just boom, 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 castle queenside, bring the rook in. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and take it, trade the queens. And already I feel like, the opening was a success for us. All right, so now's probably the time to take. to defend this guy. And the reason I'm going to take here as opposed to trading is because if I trade, I'm developing this piece for my opponent, right? Whereas if I take here, if they take me, then I'm bringing a piece into the attack. And they still have a knight sitting back here on G1. Okay, so it's a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference a lot of times, these kind of decisions, right? On who gets their pieces out quicker, who can start attacking faster. These little decisions go a long way. So that's what we're doing here. I'd like to play knight f6 and bring this bishop probably to c5 as well. Okay, so they do take. And here you can see what I'm talking about. Immediately, we are the one who has the threat, and white is now on the defensive. They do defend, which is probably a good move. You could still do this at that point, or even bishop to e3, piling up on that pinned bishop, which looks even better. So here's a situation where I think a lot of people, if they saw this, they would just immediately go grab a pawn, which is not bad. But I'm going to say this pin and active pieces and just kind of saving that threat for maybe later, I'm going to say that's more valuable. And I'm going to play the move bishop c5. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that would be fine. And I would just be up a pawn and I'm happy. But I just have a feeling this is going to work out better for us. So that's what we're doing here. They both look pretty good. I think now maybe is the time I'm going to grab the pawn, though. Just because it looks like white's going to try to go there anyway. That stops that. And I get the pawn, and then I can just continue after that. Also, the nice thing about throwing in this bishop c5 move is once my knight lands here, I don't have to worry about rook to g1 and attacking my knight like this. So with all that being thought about, let's go ahead and play knight to e3 and grab the pawn now. And keep in mind, queens have been traded. So we are a little bit closer to the end of the game. So, you know, grabbing free pawns is a good thing. If I'm able to trade some of these pieces off, we go into an endgame and I have an extra pawn or two, probably going to be a pretty easy win. So, you know, if queens were on the board and I'm just trying to attack the king, that's a different story. But pawn is a pawn. And since I didn't see anything else immediately obvious, I think it's a good time to take this. And that's not what we were going for. So I think I do have to take this. Unfortunately, whoever requested to see the Kali is not going to get to see it because this is not the typical Kali setup. But that's one thing about chess, right? You can't go into the game saying, I'm going to play this opening no matter what. I don't care what my opponent does. I'm just going to play it. That's not going to end well for you, right? You have to be able to adapt. And if they play some crazy stuff, you have to like think through, okay, what's the best thing to do? And I think here we just have to take it. It's a free pawn, right? Not only is it a free pawn, like I mentioned, we can't allow that guy to come forward and just disrupt our development. So I don't know what opening we're playing anymore, but here we go. Ahead. By the way, I want to mention something that I'm seeing in like pretty much every game that we've played this stream, I think. Our opponents are playing like they're playing a bullet game or at least like a fast blitz game, right? Like it's a 10-minute game. You don't have to play every move in like 2 seconds. Like my opponents played 1 second, 2 seconds, yeah, like basically every move is about 2 or 3 seconds. They're just playing so fast. So I think that's why we're seeing some of these, you know, pretty big mistakes too. Some of these players are probably capable of seeing some of this stuff. They're just like blitzing out these moves.